Good morning. Glad to see all of you here today. Ever since you bought this chair for me, I kind of felt obligated to sit in it. And I think I'll stand today. Is that okay? Because I think I've sat in it enough times to justify the costs and the effort. And then I like from now on to have the choice of either sitting in the chair or not sitting in the chair. But I'm delighted to have this, and thank you very much. I see this as a kind of a symbol that you really kind of care about me, and that's very important as you grow old. You know, people ignore you when you're old because you can't do stuff anymore, you can't hear, and so. Anyway, I have the title, Making and Keeping Promises. You know, we preach from the lectionary, which is a text that is set for certain Sundays of the year. And what I usually do is I look at the text, I give it a title, and then I send it to the church, you know, so they can print their bulletin. And then the week before the sermon, I'm looking at the text, and then it sort of goes in another direction. Okay, so why don't you forget this, okay? Because the story of Hannah is about the making and keeping of promises. But as I worked at the text in preparation for the sermon today, the text kind of went in another direction. So what I really kind of like to talk about today is Hannah is this woman is really deeply troubled. And what just happens is when you're deeply troubled, kind of drives you to God. Okay, so being deeply troubled is not good. But the good part of it is that when you're deeply troubled, you're paying attention to God, right? So it's not a total loss. And this is what actually happens to Hannah. So that's what I would like to kind of talk about. Now, first of all, a little history lesson, because you're very blessed that you have an Old Testament professor who's a member of your church, Dr. Jeffrey Kwan. So of all the people in Chinatown, you should be the most informed about the Old Testament. But if you're not, okay, Hebrew history begins with Abraham. The date for Abraham is about 1700 BC. He comes from the eastern tip of the Fertile Crescent. He journeys with his whole family. It could be all the servants and wives and so on. And he hears this call from God, you know, to leave this kind of a settled existence and go where God leads him, with the promise that from his descendants he would create a great nation. So Abraham is the father of faith. He doesn't know where he's going. He doesn't actually have a clear picture of what the future is. But God says go, and he goes. So his descendants actually settle in the eastern border of Egypt. And after a period of time, the settlement becomes very large. And so the Egyptians are troubled by the fact that you have this large alien population living on their eastern border. So the Israelites are enslaved, actually, to help with the huge construction projects. And it's Moses who raised in the royal court, but then decides, hey, I'm not really an Egyptian, I'm an Israelite. And then he murders an Egyptian, and he goes and disappears for a period of time. And then he hears God's call to kind of lead the people. So this is the Exodus event, which is a huge event in the history of the Israelites. Then you have a period called the period of the Judges, when Joshua leads the people in the land of Canaan. You know, the land of Canaan is actually already occupied. I mean, it's like the Jewish people, the Jewish state today is, I mean, when they went to settle there, the Palestinians were already there. Now, when the Jewish people came in, you know, the Palestinians are afraid, they're afraid, so they leave. Now they can't come back. And so all kinds of trouble. Well, when Joshua leads the Jewish people into Canaan, when you read the Hebrew scriptures, you only get the Hebrew version of the story. Because I was bothered by the fact that I said God is also concerned about the Canaanites, right? I mean, if God is God of the universe who cares for everybody, It doesn't kind of make sense. So I've always thought that the Amalekites, the Philistines, the Canaanites, and all these other people, why, so today, we just don't think about Israel, but you have to think of Palestinians, because God cares every bit as much for the Palestinians as he does for the Israelites. He cares about the people in the church, certainly, but also the people outside. So I have to kind of think about that. Anyway, during the period of the judges are like clan chiefs. They're like tribal chieftains. And what you have during this period is you have a kind of a federation of a lot of loose tribes, Hebrew tribes that settled in different parts of Canaan. Actually, they have no king. They're not actually a nation. But the priests, which is kind of hereditary, that the priests provide like guidance. And so they have certain shrines, sacred places, and Shiloh is one of them. And Eli is the priest, and he has two sons. And he's kind of in charge. And this is a place of pilgrimage. I mean, the people go there on a kind of annual basis. They offer sacrifices. And this gives them a sense of who they are and the sense of their history and so on. So this is the kind of the background. So Elkanah, he goes from his town. Every year he takes his family to Shiloh, to the shrine, to the temple, and offer the sacrifices. And then after the sacrifice, they share the meal. So what happens is that you have to bring a lamb or fruits and vegetables. You bring them to the temple and offer it. And then after that, the temple gets a part, because that's how they support the temple. I mean, the temple has not just the priests, but all kinds of people that keep repair. So there's a whole fairly large group of people that need to be supported. So when people come to the temple and make these sacrifices, afterward they share the meal. Right? I mean, it's Elkanah, he brings his whole family, and then they share this meal together. And Elkanah has two wives. Actually, my father had two wives. He had a wife in China, and then when he decided that he wanted to come over, and he has a daughter, and when he decided that he's going to come over, I don't have the details, but I think that the wife didn't want to come over, so because you can't go from China to the United States, you have to leave everybody in your family and so on. So I don't blame her for not wanting to come. She married my mother, all right? And so that's why I'm born in Oakland in 1929. Otherwise, I'd be some Chinese in China somewhere doing God knows what, right? So anyway, my father had two wives. And I didn't actually know this. Until much later. That gradually kind of dawned on me that I have a half-sister who is in China, and that I actually met her when I made my first trip to Hong Kong in 1962. And she's still living, and she's living with her daughter in Hong Kong now. And for a time, she and her husband actually lived in Southern California. She had two sons that came to America. One of them has already died. And so she's very old now, but she's interested. So the two wives. Now, when you read the Hebrew Scriptures, this is not uncommon. And if you're a Muslim, the Prophet Muhammad said that you can't have more than one wife, but you have to treat them all equally, which is kind of impossible. So one commentator says that kind of amounts to a prohibition, right? Because how can you treat them all equally? I mean, now I know some of you have children, and you try very hard to treat your children equally, but I have 4 children. I love them all, but I'm more fond of some 4. My son John says I'm my mother's favorite. I mean, he likes to think that way. But but you have this little this trouble actually because two wives is always going to be kind of competitive. And actually, I kind of likes Hannah more. You know, we don't have to detail it, but that's not unusual. I mean, like, if I'm the pastor of the church, there's some people I like, and there's some people I actually don't like. And there are like some people more. Of course, you know, but then I try very hard to be kind to everybody, and because I have to, all right. But anyhow, Hannah doesn't have children, but the good thing is that Elkanah really loves her, is really concerned about her. And then Peninnah, who is the other wife, she has children. And she has children, and actually many children. But the problem here is that if you are a woman at that time, and you can't have children, and when the role of the woman is to have children, I mean, you can't have careers and so on. You're in a society that says if you're a woman, your whole selfhood depends on the fact that you can have children. So if you don't have children, can't have children, then you have a very shrunken sense of self. I mean, it's very hard to have any self-esteem. It's very hard to think of yourself as worthy of respect. And so she becomes very depressed. Because Peninnah, who is not a very nice person, is always belittling her and making her feel bad. Right? So this is a very bad situation. You have Hannah, who is really depressed, bothered about the fact that she cannot play her proper role. And you have a rival. Actually, Peninnah is not a colleague. It's actually a rival, not a very friendly rival. So you have a woman who is very depressed, and you have a Peninnah which aggravates her situation. Now, I'm kind of thinking about our life today, and I'm saying to myself, you know, society places certain kinds of expectations on us, and when we cannot meet these expectations, then we do not have a sense of self. This is very problematic. And now, when I was growing up in the church, like in the 1930s, we did not have very many college-educated people. We had a couple. One graduated from UC Berkeley, and she's, I don't know what she trained in, but she never had to work. She was the only person in the church that didn't have to work. She was actually on the Home Mission Board, which is very unusual. They had meetings in New York. She had to take the train to New York, take the train. It takes 2 weeks. I mean, what Chinese working in laundry can take 2 weeks off to be on somebody's board, right? So, and then we have a dentist, actually, who, Dr. Theodore Lee. But this is very unusual. The rest of the people are blue-collar people. Now, one of the reasons why Chinese churches are growing so fast in the Bay Area, see, we had 50 in 1955, we have like 200 now. 200. In 1996, we had like 22,000 people. Like today, there are like over 30,000 people, Chinese, worshiping in Chinese church. That's like half of Memorial Stadium. All right. So, I mean, like, so if you include all the children and the total constituency and so on, the number of Chinese that are actually going to Chinese churches can fill Memorial Stadium, actually. So, and one of the reasons why we're growing so fast is the Chinese church today is made up mostly of college-educated professionals. They have money, they're trained, they're trained. When I was growing up, it was very hard to find a Sunday school teacher because none of our people are trained. I mean, we had to depend on missionaries. So when I was growing up in the church, the missionaries were heading up like the primary department. I mean, at one time we had 3 or 4 missionaries actually in the church. But today the church is made up mostly of college-educated professionals. All right, so you come to a Chinese church and you're not a college-educated professional, you're going to feel out of place, right? In the 1930s, people felt perfectly at home if they weren't college-educated because everybody else was like me, right? So now we have, like in our church, a Friday night program that has about 100 people. These are night school students. They come to night school Monday through Friday. Friday, they don't have classes, and so we have our own program. We have our own people, small conversation classes, and then we serve them at dinner. About 80 people stay for that, and there's a little fellowship time, and so forth and so on. Now, these people are like blue-collar people. They're not college-educated professionals. And actually, they tell us that we don't feel very comfortable if we were to come on Sunday morning because the people you have come are so unlike us. So unlike us. So most of us now think that if you're going to reach restaurant workers and blue-collar people, you have to have separate services for them, just like you have separate services for Chinese speaking and so on. So now Rick Warren, Purpose-Driven Church, Saddleback, 20 or 30,000 people. I have read Purpose-Driven Church, and Rick Warren he says a lot of interesting things, but one of the things he said is that just because you read his book, just doesn't mean that you can duplicate what I'm doing. First of all, you're not me. All right. Secondly, he said, you don't have my stats. And thirdly, you're not in my context. And he said, but no, that doesn't mean you can't learn from me. But Rick Warren's churches grew so fast partly because the first people he reached out to were upper middle class and lower upper class college-educated professionals, people that work for Disney and people who are really technical people that work for the space industry. Because he knew that these are the people that have the money and the skill. And then later on, when we have these people, then we can do something for the Vietnamese who can never do anything for us, not at the moment. And so if you are not able, like today, if you're not a college-educated professional, you can't actually support a family. I mean, you can't support a family if you're working at McDonald's. You can't. I mean, there's no way you can have decent housing and so on. And when you cannot do that, that does something to you. I'm reading a book now called Black Rage, and the one chapter talks about black men growing up. And this is one of the problems with black men growing up. Now, this book was written several decades ago by a couple of black psychiatrists. And this is the problem with black men growing up is that they cannot protect their families. Now think about that. You're a black man, you have a family, and you see your children being abused and your wife being abused. You cannot do anything. Right? That's like Hannah not having children. You're a black man, you can't protect your family. Right? So they don't bother to accumulate things because everything you accumulate can be taken away from you. So it's not that blacks are lazy or anything like that. I mean, that whole context creates kind of an absolutely impossible situation for them. I think of university professors. If university professors don't publish, it's like Hannah not having children. They're having a tough time too. They're having a tough time. So, it's a fact, but it's unfortunate that you and I value people for what they do, what they can do. That's very unfortunate, that you value because of what you can do. You're not valued for what you are. Now, my wife and I and some of the church people, we went down to St. Anthony's in San Francisco. They serve meals. Actually, I put in a 4-hour shift. I'm 80 years old, and this is really hard work for me, okay? We used to see Gong, we're Thais, and we work in offices, we don't. And so, you go there, and then they serve meals. It's just an absolutely marvelous place, and I do that not because they need my help, but because I need myself. I'm doing this for myself. I need once in a while, once a year, I need to go there and remind myself that there are lots of people that are not like me. All right? So about 1,500 people go through from 10:45 to 1:30. I mean, that line never ends. And I spent part of the time I was I was in a small crew ripping the meat off turkeys, okay, with rubber gloves. And then the other time, the people that cannot go through the line, they sit and the trays are brought to them. There's a special section for women. Not very many women. Most of these are men. And one of the things that really impresses me is how respectful they are to their guests. They're very respectful. Very respectful. They don't preach to them. There's no anybody. I mean, if you're downtown, and you're downtown around lunchtime, you can walk in and they'll serve you. There's no question asked. I'm thinking of doing that one of these days, just to kind of walk in there. But they don't. There's no condition. And I'm really impressed with these people. They're very respectful, very respectful. And you have other problems besides being hungry. They have a little station there. You walk in there, and you tell them what your problem is, and they'll make an appointment to see you later on during the week. With housing, or you have drug problems, or whatever. And it's so. When I was teaching my children how to sing songs, I ran across this song. It's like, if anybody asks you who you are, you know that? If anybody asks you who you are, tell them you're a child of God. Right? Tell them you're a child of God. That's why when we meet somebody we don't know, we like to know what they do for a living. Right? Because then we know, we want to know how we stand in relationship to these other people. So, what happens here is that Hannah is such a desperate situation. His husband, Elkanah, is very, you can't fault him because he's very concerned that the wife is not eating properly, is really depressed, is crying all the time, and he says something. Yes, this is something I would say. I said, why are you so depressed? Why aren't you eating? Am I not more valuable to you than 10 sons? Okay, that's an overestimation. It doesn't work, all right, because her problem is so deep-seated, so much into her own sense of selfhood that saying, hey, you know, it will not do it. And so it drives her to God, and that's the good thing. As she goes to the shrine, she's weeping, she's crying. Eli, the priest, is there. He thinks she's drunk, you know. And she prays. I mean, this is a desperate woman who acknowledges that, hey, ultimately, our life is entirely in God's hands. First, we have no life except the life that we give us. And how long we live and the kind of circle is entirely in God's hands. Ultimately, it's entirely in God's hands. I can't tell you why you're here in Oakland, California, with a home to go to, and not in Rwanda. I mean, there's no explanation for that except to say that's where you are, and ultimately our whole life is in God's hands. So she makes this promise that if God will look at her and be merciful to her and not forget her and remember her, then if this happens, then she's going to dedicate this child to the service of the shrine. In other words, this is not my child. I mean, if I have this child, I'm going to not keep the child. Just think about that. You want this child so badly, and finally you do have a child, and then you have to say, this is not my child. I'm going to give it up to the service of God. Now, I want you to think, have you ever had a situation like Hannah, maybe not, where there's something you need so badly that you came to the place where you said, you actually showed up, you're going to do a little business with God, you maybe it's bargaining, you know, if this happens, then I'll do this. Well, if you do, then it's probably so personal that it's difficult to talk about. But, you know, there are people who are in the war who said, hey, if I ever get out of this, you know, I'm going to do this. Or people in desperate situations, if I ever get through this, I'm going to change my life. Well, how about the rest of us, okay? How about the rest of us? I say, oh, no, that doesn't fit me. I'm not Hannah. I'm not in that Hannah mode at all. How about the rest of us? You know, we grew up in a good home. We did really well in school. We graduated from college on schedule. We found a job, and then you marry your childhood sweetheart. You have 3 children who are all above average. You know, I mean, sure, there's some bumps along the road, but you know, that's to be expected. But your selfhood, your sense of self, that was never threatened. All right. Now, if you belong to that, now I belong to that. Pretty much, I belong to that. Then it would seem to be that now none of these things, if you believe, as I believe, that everything is in the hands of God, then if your life went that way, right, you have even more reason. I mean, Hannah had to plead, and you have even more reason. Well, all these things are given to you. You never asked for them, but you got it anyway. You have even more reason to be thankful and to say, Lord, insofar as you've given me all these things undeserved, unasked for, I'm going to do this for you. All right. Everything worthwhile is driven by gratitude. Right? You're so grateful. And the text for this is that to whom much is given shall much be expected. That's the thing. You have even more reason if life had gone smoothly for you. I've been asked also to say the benediction. When you come to church and you hear the benediction, I don't send you away and say, good luck. Good luck to all of you as you leave the church, right? Because good luck means that if you're lucky, then things will happen. If you're not lucky, then it won't happen. That there is no God, who is sort of in control of the universe, that governs the length of your life and the circumstances. It's a good luck, right? But I remember distinctly one Sunday, when I was in church, there was a Caucasian who walked in. Never seen him before and never seen him since. But I spoke to him briefly, and he was very troubled. And he had a lot of important decisions to make, and he was unsure at all of what his future would be. So when I said the benediction, instead of saying the usual ones, the ones from Scripture, I made up one, just for him. Okay. I made up a benediction just for him. And I said, whatever be your name, wherever you may go, whatever are the decisions you must make, whatever are the burdens you must bear, whether this week to come will bring you joy or bring you sorrow, whether in the providence of God you will live or you will die, may the Lord go with you, and may His mercy follow you. Now later on when we do the benediction, I'll do that. Is that okay? Thank you.